first I was afraid, I was petrified. Kept thinking I could never live without you by my side. But then I spent so many nights thinking how you did me wrong, and I grew strong. And I learned how to get along, and now you're back from outer space. I just walked in to find you here. Got some sad look upon your face. I should have changed my stupid lock. I should have made you leave your key. If I had known for just 1 second you'd be back to bother me. Go on now, go. Walk out my door. Just turn around now. You're not welcome anymore. Weren't you the one?
I wish it was, Grace. Hi.
Goodbye. Did you think I'd go?
Yes. And wait.
Did you think I'd...
So that was Cassie Nadeau, and she is one of the daughters of J. Paul Nadeau, who is my guest today. And he is so amazing. Oh, Grace, I wish I could sing like that. Wasn't that beautiful? You'll have to hear the rest of her. Cassie Nadeau, and he has 2 daughters, as a matter of fact. His other daughter is Amy Rogerio, and she just had a beautiful little granddaughter, Gabrielle, but we'll let Paul tell you about that. Oh, Paul is a retired police detective, a hostage negotiator, an international peacemaker. Seriously, it reads like a Hollywood movie. It should be a Hollywood movie. His life is amazing. How he is still with us is even more amazing. He's a global keynote speaker. He's a former police detective, a hostage negotiator, and he spent more than 31 years working with victims of crime and perpetrators and learning the top experts in abuse situations and murder investigations and hostage takings. And he would actually talk to them. And I think he got so far in his career by treating everyone as you would treat anyone. And wow, wait till you hear how a terrorist saved his life. It is amazing, amazing, amazing. And he's in the green room, and I don't want him to eat too much vegetables and fruit before he comes on, because he understands the importance of taking care of each other and contributing to our world. And he's got some great ideas, starting with you. So without further ado, here is J. Paul Nadeau. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you. You just took me away from a platter of vegetables and fruit that I was totally enjoying, thanks to you and your studio manager, which I appreciate very much. So thank you. And what a wonderful introduction that was, Cynthia. I'm so happy to be on your show. And to everyone who's listening in, I hope that this next hour with Cynthia and I will illuminate your life and help you through some of the struggles that you may be going through, or that you just enjoy the entertainment that's about to happen.
Yes. First of all, maybe you should tell everyone about your early life and your challenges. And then I'm not sure, do you want to go into the big hostage story first and pull them in, or shall we move around?
I think it's nice to start at the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah. So my story is not unlike a lot of stories out there. I was an abused child. My father was a very violent alcoholic, and he himself was a very troubled man who was severely abused when he was a child. But this was back in the 50s and the 60s, when help was not readily available. And consequently, my dad took out his emotional stresses and his lack of being able to cope with the world, I suppose, on us through severe physical and mental abuse. And as a result, I had no confidence in myself, Cynthia. I had none. When I would go to school, I would be the kid that would always fail. I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to believe in myself. I wasn't motivated. My teachers would even say, why aren't you like the other kids? Why aren't you smart? This was back in the 60s. Why aren't you this and why aren't you that? And I'd come back home and I'd get abused by my dad. Go back to school, the bullies would pick on me. And that was my life. That was the circle of my life. And I remember thinking to myself, this is your life, Paul. It's just it. But then something happened in grade 7 that changed everything. I remember one of my teachers. I remember him well. His name was Mr. Coggins. Mr. Coggins could throw me across the room. He would grab me and actually, like a bowling ball, if the floor was well waxed, he could kind of shove me across the floor right into the wall with all the boots. I remember hitting the wall a couple of times and all the boots flying, and it was like a strike when you're when you're bowling. All the pins go down. But he did something. I'm in grade 7, starting to like girls, and I felt like a failure. Nobody paid attention to me other than to bully me or laugh. And if I'm talking to anybody who's gone through this, you know what I'm talking about. It's that feeling of helplessness. And the feeling, is that all there is to life? Is that what my life is going to be? And I'm in grade 7. Mr. Coggins comes out one day and he says, we're going to have a test next week. And he says, I expect everybody to pass, except for you, Nadeau. I already know you're going to fail. I'm going to tell you, Cynthia, in that moment, I felt humiliation like I'd never felt it before. I'd felt it, but not quite like that. In grade 7, again, starting to like girls, wanting to be noticed, but not noticed for being a failure. And having the students look at me after Mr. Coggins said that and laugh and snicker and say, yeah, he's going to fail, it really weighed heavily in my heart. I went back home and I cried. And that weekend, I did something that I wasn't accustomed to. I actually opened the books and tried to study. My poor mom, she used to spend hours with me trying to drill something into my head and it would never stick. This time, I was alone in my bedroom, crying and trying to study without the ability or the talents. I wouldn't say ability, but not without the talents. I didn't have the know-how, but I repeated the lessons and I pretended I was a teacher and I would talk out loud. And when I went back to school that next week, I remember sitting in the classroom about ready to write the test. And we all have these voices in our head. At least I can speak on behalf of most people because I've heard we have competing voices. I had one voice that said, Paul, why are you even trying? Because you're going to fail. He's going to make you feel so miserable. You're going to fail. Why are you even here? The next voice was telling me, it's on my other shoulder, and it's saying, you know what? You know the stuff. Just wait for the paper. You know this. So the paper comes, and I have those two competing voices. But I did the best I could. I left it there. And the next day, Mr. Coggins comes back in with the papers all graded. And what was customary in his classroom is he used to call the students with the lowest score, meaning me, to the front of the classroom to pick our papers up first. So it was the walk of shame. And I was always accustomed to being the one. As soon as he would call out 47, this is out of 100, I would get up and I would start, walking towards him and picking up the paper. So when he picked up the paper, he started calling and I got up and it wasn't my name. And then I waited for the second person. I got up, it wasn't me. And the third person, the fourth person, the fifth person, the 10th person. And I'm thinking to myself, oh boy. And I've got those two voices, guys, got those two voices. The one saying, you know what's going to happen? He is going to wait until the very end. And he is going to call you and humiliate you like you've never been humiliated before, boy. And I thought, yep. And the other voice is saying, no, Paul, you passed this one. You did good. It came down to 3 students. It came down to my cousin Lise, another girl by the name of Giselle, and me. Now, Lise and Giselle were what we call Browners. They always competed for the highest score in class, and they were proud of their stature and their position. So the next student to be called was my cousin Lise, and that left Giselle and I. And I'm thinking, oh, what's in store? I was the next one, Cynthia, to be called. Yeah. I had the second highest score that day. And instead of taking the walk of shame, I took the walk of pride. And my heart grew like the Grinch's heart. It just grew. Something happened to me in that moment that stuck with me for the rest of my life. I started to believe in myself. I started to believe that if I really focused on doing my best, I could actually make a good mark in this life. And I went on to develop the habits and the confidence that was necessary to propel me from that abused kid to an international peacekeeper, a detective in the Special Victims Unit, a hostage negotiator, a polygraph examiner, an author. Nothing would stop me. Now, with you, I'm into acting with the great Glenn Morshower. And I've written a film script that's going to become a movie based on one of my true stories. And I'm thinking to myself, what's next? Because I'm ready for it. So the lesson that I would like to impart here is that through some of our biggest struggles come our very biggest accomplishments. If we allow them to, and if we are strong enough to turn our failures, and I don't call them failures, I call them data, but if we take whatever it is that went wrong and we say, that doesn't define me, I define me. That was a stepping stone to get me to where I want. And I am going to be the person that I was meant to be. And I'm going to push myself until I get there. And nobody is going to stop me. Doesn't matter if you are a 7th Dan black belt in jiu-jitsu. I am getting to where I want to be because nobody stops me but me. So those are the lessons I learned.
Patricia is up in Canada, as a matter of fact. And she says, strength and confidence, karma's waiting to reveal. You are amazing, Paul.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you. Thank you.
And she's amazing. You two are going to have to meet. We'll arrange that.
Right.
And Justin says, hi, nice to see you. And hi, Eric.
Justin Preston. Hello, Justin. Good to see you. And I see Grace is here, Patricia,
yes,
and Nancy.
And Nancy. Hi, Nancy from the Philippines. Wow. We love you. Thank you. This is an amazing guest. I'm so glad you're here so you can spread the word around the globe and have him at your talks and stuff because Paul is freaking amazing. Where do you want to go next? Do you want to go into your career of law enforcement or do you want to keep on?
You know what? Yeah, sure. Let's talk about that. I'm going to give a little, no, I'm not going to give any warning. Heck, I'm going to say what I say and people are going to have to take it the way it is.
Great.
I talked about my dad being a very troubled man, an alcoholic, very violent. I remember when I was about 8 years old, I'll go back 1 year. When I was 7 years old, that's when I decided that I was going to become a policeman. It was actually after a severe beating that my dad had given me, and I was lying on the ground, and I was looking up at him and thinking to myself, when I grow up, I'm going to be a policeman so I can arrest you. And that stuck with me. And from that day on, I had this vision of me becoming a police officer and a detective. I even carried a little leather badge that I had made up, and my cousins and I would play detective and robbers. And I was always the detective with my little leather badge. When I was 8 years old, yeah, I know, I love it too. When I was 8 years old, my dad, my brother and I, it was about 2 weeks before Christmas. And we were standing on the landing of our home, all excited for Christmas. We still believed in Santa Claus, and Santa Claus was going to be there in 2 weeks, right? So 2 kids just hopping and just excited about Christmas. It's Canada and very cold outside, lots of snow. And my dad steps in from the outdoors carrying a .22 rifle. And he looked up at us because we were standing above him on the landing. And he says, I just killed Santa Claus. There's not going to be a Christmas this year. And I remember falling apart. My brother and I both fell apart. That was the day I stopped believing in Santa Claus because Santa Claus was dead. And ironically, that same rifle that he used to kill Santa Claus with is the one that he used to kill himself with when I was 17. And I went on to become that police officer that I had promised myself at the age of 7. Because again, our circumstances don't define us, we define them. And I had developed these skills and the ability to go for what I wanted, despite the tragedies and traumas that happened. We are not defined by our traumas. We can leave them behind. I tell this story quite comfortably because I've dealt with it. And I feel that in many ways, the things that happened to me also happened for me, because I never would have become a police officer had it not been for my father's severe abuse. And sometimes we look back at things that happened to us, the bad things, and we think, well, that happened to me, and I can't live, or I can't become who I want to be because that happened to me. When we only look back at it and say, well, what was it exactly? What was it about that might have contributed to the person that you are today, or that has given you the strength to become the person that you are today? And at the age of 21, I became that police officer, and then I became that detective. And I kept going for the things that excited me and that gave me passion. And I've never stopped, Cynthia. So that's a little bit, well, that is my background. That's it in a nutshell.
Yes. And then you had your 2 daughters at home and a wife at that time.
Yep.
And wait until you hear this next part, Anna and Grace. This is freaking amazing, Miss Anne Marie. And so he decided to go be, oh, yes, Eric, Romans 8:28. He decided that you had to try out for you to apply. It was a big thing to get selected to be a peace negotiator.
A peacekeeper.
Over in, yes. Please
Yeah.
go. If you're ready, you got something.
I'm ready. That's
okay, guys, hold on to your hats. The story is freaking unbelievable.
It's also available on YouTube, because I did a TED Talk on this one. In 2004, I was working as an instructor. I had left the Special Victims Unit. I was dealing with the victims of sexual assault and child abuse, and I was there for 5 years, and I got burnt out. Hearing these devastating stories time and time again, I got to the point, and I was a very good detective and good at listening and getting people to open up. I had that ability to get people to speak to me, even tell me their deepest, darkest secrets, because as a detective in the Special Victims Unit, you're asking the victim of a serious sexual assault to tell you the details. And can you imagine how much trauma that stirs up within them to have to repeat the details? But I was able to do it by giving them the understanding that they would be helping others and helping themselves by sharing their experiences with others. And I think that that's so important for all of us to do, is that we're meant to share with each other. So I had left that division, the unit, because I started to compare stories, and I thought, dude, you can't compare one person's trauma, their experience, their assault, to another person's and think, well, this person cried more than the other one. What's wrong with that? When I felt that way, I went to my boss and I said, I'm burnt out. I'm starting to compare stories, and we could never compare what we've gone through emotionally or what somebody else has gone to another person. We're all different human beings. So I need out. He says, where do you want to go? I said, I don't know. He says, well, there's an opening in the Learning Center, and you can teach negotiations. You can teach, all kinds of things. And I said, sure, put me there. So I went into the training center, and as fate would have it, and I do believe that the stars align sometimes, I'm there about a year, and a notice comes across my computer screen saying, we're looking for international peacekeepers. The United Nations has asked us to spare officers to go across the globe and to help out in war-torn places and places where they need assistance. And I thought, that's pretty cool. And I looked at the list, and the list included Jordan, right next to Iraq. And they were looking for an instructor, someone to teach Iraqi police cadets on survival, human rights, all those things. And I thought, well, that's kind of in line with what I'm doing right now, right? And so I applied for it. And as luck or fate would have it, I was selected. 20 Canadians from across the country, obviously, were selected to go on this peacekeeping mission, and I was one of them. And I thought it was a hard decision to come to, because my daughters were 14 and 16, I think, and I was leaving them for 6 months to a year. And I gathered the family together, and I said, guys, it's my opportunity to help try to fix the world from terrorism. And I feel compelled to do this. And I won't go unless each of you grant me your permission. And it's not going to be easy for you, but we have support in place, and the police department's prepared to support you and help you in whichever way they want. Our family is ready, and they gave me their blessing. So I found myself in Jordan. I'll tell you, wow, what an awakening. I really thought, because I'd been watching CNN, I thought everybody in the Middle East was bad. And I thought I was going to get killed the moment I got off the plane. I didn't know if I was coming back. I found the people in Jordan and from Iraq and the people that I dealt with to be some of the most amazing human beings in the world. They were so kind and polite, most of them. There was a small sliver of people who were prejudiced, of course, and who didn't like the fact that the Iraq was at war with the Americans and all that kind of stuff. But I was welcome for the most part of it. Now, imagine this. I am now training police cadets from Iraq in Jordan, in the middle of the desert, in a secret police college. It wasn't so secret. It was in the middle of the desert on the main road heading into Iraq. So our concern was that we had 3,000 police cadets every 8 weeks coming through the academy. Imagine this, 3,000 young men, older men from the ages of about 16 to about 65. They weren't supposed to be 16 or 65. They were supposed to be 18 to 55. But they were smuggling in. They were coming in. There was no way that Iraq could vet the cadets fast enough. They just needed bodies to hold guns and to protect their country that was at war. And so they would scoop up even people from the street, put them on buses and send them out to get trained. And I had to teach a class. I shouldn't say had to teach a class. I got to teach a class. And I thought to myself, if I were them and I'm leaving my family for 8 weeks, and some of these cadets had never left their family for a day. They were village people, many of them, who had never gone on a camping trip. They were family oriented, and now they were away from their families for 8 weeks, or about to be. And if I were them and their family is at risk of being bombed, being killed on the streets, how would I feel? How would I want to be treated? Because some of them at the academy were not being treated very well. They were 9/11 had just happened. This was 2005. There was a lot of anger. That's why I was there. It was 2005. The world was at war, and we had these cadets that were being scooped up and just brought into the academy to be trained. And some of them were mentally ill. Some of them were physically unable to carry out their duties. We had doctors, we had lawyers, we had coffee people, and we also had terrorists, because terrorists had managed to find an easy way to get into the academy. All they had to do was put on a police uniform, step up and say, "I volunteer." And they were brought into the academy. Nobody was able to tell that they were terrorists. Sure, we had a small security division that was trying to filter out the terrorists, but we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it fast enough. So here I am, about ready to teach my classes, thinking, how am I going to treat these people? And I thought, well, these men deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. They need to be treated the way that I would like to be treated if I were in that situation. If my country, if America was under attack, if Canada was under attack, if any of our beautiful countries out there were under, which some of them are right now, how would I like to be treated? So at the beginning of the class, Cynthia, I would stand before them and I would say, it is my honor to be here with you and to share my experiences with you. My name is Paul. I'm from Canada, and I'm here to help. And I would love to share what I know about policing with you. And I hope that we will get along, because I only had them for 2 weeks, for the next 2 weeks. And I would love to hear your stories as much as I tell you my stories. And I will make this experience as pleasant as possible. At the time, I was acting. And I brought acting into the classroom because some of the students didn't know how to read and write. And how are they going to remember the lessons unless they role played? So I would say, okay, today, Muhammad, you are the police officer, and you are the robber, and you are the witnesses. And I want you guys to do the experience, to have the experience, and to you as a police officer, I want you to do everything that I talked about yesterday. And they would do it. It was great.
Yeah.
Every 2 weeks, I'd get another 50 to 60 students. And I would start off my class, the first class, with the same way. I'm here to, to help you. I'm here to share my experiences. And I remember it was about 4 months into my mission, there was one cadet who had a bodyguard, and that wasn't unusual because many of the cadets coming were from different tribes, and some of them had status. And if you had status, you would get the best chair. Somebody would pull it out for you, and you would have a bodyguard or two. So this one man, he remained after class and would ask to speak to me. Surprisingly, he spoke very good English. And I had a translator, of course, because I don't speak Arabic. So I had a Jordanian translator, but the Jordanian translator, his day was over, he was gone. And this one cadet with his bodyguard stayed behind, and he asked to have coffee with me. So we had coffee for 2 or 3 nights talking about life and talking about, I was surprised, we had pleasant conversations. He says, Mr. Paul, tell me what you think about this war. Tell me about this. Tell me about that. Tell me about your country. So we developed this after class kind of coffee meet and friendship. And I thought, this is very pleasant. But after the 2 weeks, he went on to another classroom and I got some new students. Now let's fast forward about 5 weeks later. I had successfully gained the job of counselor, advocate and counselor at the academy. This was a big move for me. I was no longer teaching. I was actually working to counsel and to help and to improve the circumstances of the cadets at the academy. One of my jobs was to sit and listen to cadets who would come in to ask to be repatriated home because they had broken hearts or they couldn't get a hold of their families. So I would do a police investigation trying to get a hold of their families. And some of the stories I could tell you would break your heart. But one cadet came in, and he used to come in because he was lonely. And he said, Mr. Paul, do you have time today? And I said, yeah, I think I have time for you. If any other students come, though, I'm going to have to take them if I haven't seen them before. He says, oh, no, that's okay. So I spoke to him, and he says, I want to tell you, Mr. Paul, there's going to be an attack on the academy from inside, and internationals are going to be killed. And I heard that that's going to happen soon. And I said, okay, well, thank you. And he left. And I went to our security division and I said, listen, I just got some information that there was going to be an attack. And they said, yeah, we've just heard something about that too. But when you're at war, you don't get to go home. When you're at war, you stay on the battlefield. And we had a dedication to our soldiers just yesterday, didn't we? No, Monday, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. We know that the experience of being at battle means that you stay during the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's usually bad and ugly. And so I stayed, and I had a partner in the advocacy and counseling division, but he was a Finnish officer by the name of Nadeau. Nadeau and I are still good friends. And Nadeau stood about a foot taller than I did. And he's just the kindest guy that you'd ever want to meet. And he looks like Chewbacca from Star Wars. He's just a big, he had the face that looked like Chewbacca. He was so friendly. And I thought, one of the friendliest men I've ever met. And we were used to get to the academy because we didn't stay on the grounds. We used to leave the grounds and go back home about an hour and a half away, drive into the academy and go through security and come onto the grounds every day. But he and I had to arrive before all the other international instructors because we were in the advocacy and counseling division. Our job was to vet the cadets that we felt should be repatriated home, because some of them had been sexually assaulted. Some of them had been raped the night before. Some of them were suffering from mental illness. And we had a list of these cadets that we felt could not stay on the academy grounds. And we had to make a case before the director to say, please, sir, send these men home. They're not qualified, fit, or able to stay here without serious repercussions. So that's what we would do every morning as the sun would rise. On this particular occasion, we went to the director with our papers and we gave our cases. And the director was then tasked with deciding yay or nay. But my partner and I would leave. And as we were walking through the desert that morning, we were walking back to our building, which was several hundred feet away. And there were other buildings in the desert as well. Different. There was a hospital, and there were other buildings for different events. There was a cafeteria, like a canteen. There was all kinds of things. But we're walking through the desert just as the sun's coming up. And from behind one of those buildings, there were about 40 armed cadets. Now, when I say armed, fortunately, they didn't have guns, but they had rocks and sticks and anything sharp that they could collect. And they had been collecting a bunch of these weapons to attack internationals. And today was the day. That was the day. And my partner and I happened to be the two unlucky ones that showed up first. And so we found ourselves surrounded by 40 armed insurgent cadets, hooting and hollering, sticks, stones, ready to break our heads and ready to kill us. And I remember standing there with my friend Yadamo and looking up at him, and he said something to me I'll never forget. He patted me on the head. He went down, he just kind of patted me on the head, and he says, "This is going to hurt, little buddy." And I looked up at him and I said, "Yes, it is." And the thought that went through my head were my two daughters, my 14-year-old and my 16-year-old at home. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to see them again. And I remember that I knew I was going to die, but I wasn't going to go out without a good fight. And no sooner had I had that thought, we were grabbed. They started to beat us. We started to fight back, but there were 40 of them and 2 of us. Found ourselves on the ground, and I remember being beaten. And as I was thinking to myself, and you know those cartoons where you see little stars in the characters, that get hit, they get hit over the head and they got little stars? That happens. I think I saw stars that day, and I thought, this is my last breath. I heard one voice yelling above the hooting and hollering, because these insurgents, these terrorists they were like a pack of wolves, just tearing us apart. But one voice was yelling my name, "Mr. Paul, Mr. Paul, Mr. Paul." And he would yell something in Arabic. And whatever he said, because I didn't have my language assistance, whatever he said made an impact on the group, because they stopped hitting us. They went silent and they moved away. It was like the parting of the Red Sea. And I remember being on the ground and hearing these orders being barked by this cadet who I didn't know who he was. But as it turns out, he was one of the lead terrorists. And he recognized that I was the one being beaten. And when I was gaining my vision and looking to see who it was, through my bloody eyes, I see this one cadet with a great big smile on his face. And it was that cadet who had coffee with me that I had spoken to just a short while before I got transferred. And he came over and he looked at me and he extended his arm and he lifted me from the ground. And he said, "You and your partner, you go. Today's not going to be a good day." And he had the biggest smile on his face. And we left. We left. We hightailed it out there. When we got back to our building, we called the security. We managed to put a stop to all the international instructors coming in that day. They were stopped at the gate. We left in our vehicles and just scooted out. And it was chaos in the academy that day. They destroyed the academy. They beat some of the cadets who weren't in line with the terrorist thoughts, because not everybody is a terrorist. And they beat the ones that they felt were not in line with their beliefs. And we escaped with our lives. And I remember thinking to myself, how is it that I'm alive? How is it that I got spared? And I remembered our visits, that cadet and I. And I thought, if I had treated him any differently, if I had treated him with disdain, disgust, because some of the instructors were very angry in 2005 at all Iraqi people. Didn't matter what status or who you were or how good you were. They were angry with everybody and they would call them names and they would belittle them. I wasn't that way. And anybody who worked for me wasn't that way. And I remember thinking, what you give is what you get. If you give somebody dignity and respect, you're likely to get it in return. This has been a staple Cynthia, in my career, even dealing with murderers and rapists, when I walked in to interrogate them, I wouldn't walk in to interrogate a rapist or a murderer. I walked in to talk to a human being who had been accused, and I would treat them the way that I wanted to be treated and try to get their stories by making a connection with them. And one of my teaching, well, a couple of things that I teach to people, two of the greatest lessons I learned, and I think that we all have this inside of us as we grew up, but it became apparent to me when I became a police officer. Number one is you get what you give. And I just explained that. And the other one is that we are more similar than we are different. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a cross to carry. Everybody's got their hardships. They've got their heartbreaks. They've got the people that they love. They bleed the same way that you and I bleed. They cry the way you and I cry. They have worries and they have joys. They have families. So we're more similar than we are different. And if we see each other as being these human beings that are meant to work together and to help each other through this thing called life, could you imagine how different it would be by treating people the way that we wanted to be treated? We want to be treated and thinking, you're just like me. You're just like me. You may have different views and different thoughts, and they may differ from mine, but who am I to judge? And that carried me through. And I got saved more than once, and by bad guys. I got saved by a terrorist. I'm here today because a terrorist saved my life. I remember being on the street and about ready to get my hide beaten by a bunch of bad guys. And one of the biggest bad guys comes in and says, I know this cop. He's a good one. You guys get lost. And I'm thinking to myself, wow. I became friends with one of the hardest criminals. That's another story. This one will break your heart if I tell it to you. Jimmy Donovan's story is one of my favorite stories because it talks about how we can reach some of the unreachables, or people we think are unreachable. And Jimmy Donovan being one of the meanest and hardest criminal who spent years, 7 or 8 years in one of we call it the Kingston Penitentiary. It's a high class, not a high class. It's just it's a prison for hardened criminals. He spent 7 years on a manslaughter there. He was in charge of a killing order. If they were going to take over the jail, they were going to kill all the security people, and he was that guy. And I have a story that, as I said, if I have time to tell it, I'm happy to tell it. But we can talk about something else because I've been talking a lot.
No, keep going. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah, let me tell you. It was 2 years into my career. And can you hear me all right, Cynthia?
Yes.
Okay, good. It's about 2 years into my career. And again, like I was a uniform officer, just very blue, like just straight out of the box, and just learning how to work on my own and how to deal with the complexities of human nature and the discord that we have within our cities and our families and such. And I am the police officer. Mm-hmm. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning on a very cold October night. In Canada, it can get very cold. I had my fall jacket on with a sweater. I had the heater on in my car. I was alone cruising the streets, and I get a 911 call, and it was an unknown trouble, but all we knew was that a man was going berserk in a high rise, low income high rise area, and that he had assaulted 2 ambulance attendants. And I was in the vicinity, so I pick up my radio and I said, 1712, that was my call sign. 1712 to control, I'm in the vicinity, I'll drop over there. And I drove into the neighborhood, and I parked a distance away from the ambulance that I saw down the street. And I remember getting out of the car, heater still on, and I got the doors locked, and I put on my jacket, and it's already on, but I kind of snuggled myself in, and I started to walk carefully towards the ambulance, and I could see the 2 ambulance attendants, and they're sitting on the ground, and each of them are holding their heads. And as I'm walking, I could hear some howling. And when I looked over from a distance, I could see this man, 6'2", muscular guy. He looked like Thor, long blonde, stringy hair. And he was looking up at the moon, and he was doing one of these. He was just howling. And I was just mesmerized for a moment. I'm just looking at him and looking at the ambulance attendants, and they were kind of like, yep, that's who you're here for. And one thing I noticed about this guy, he wasn't wearing a stitch of clothing except for a pair of tidy whities, his underwear. And he's on this cold October night. He's howling at the moon in a rage. And I carefully walk towards the ambulance attendants, and they say, he's all yours. He assaulted us. He's got some thing going on. I don't know if it's drugs or whatever it is, but he's in a severe pain, but we're not taking him to the hospital. He's already beaten us up. We're leaving. I said, what is, and they said, one more thing. You better get a lot of backup. That's Jimmy Donovan. And I said, well, who's Jimmy Donovan? You don't know Jimmy Donovan? I didn't. I found out who he was. He had a record as long as I could. It just went on and on. Assaults, robberies, attempted murder, all this kind of stuff. And he's out on the streets. And this guy is the one that I now have to deal with. No backup, nothing. And the ambulance is driving away. I'm 20, 25 feet away from my car. Jimmy Donovan is about 20 feet away from me. And he hasn't seen me yet. He's still howling at the moon. And I'm thinking to myself, what do I do? Okay, well, what does your training tell you to do? It tells you to wait for backup. But you're out here in the middle of nowhere, 25 feet away from your car. So what are you going to do? You're going to carefully walk over to your car, get in, close the door, lock it, and wait for backup. Then you're going to handle it. That was my plan. I'm 2 years on. That was my plan. As I started to carefully maneuver my way over to the car, guess what happens? My radio goes off. The squelching of my radio, my portable radio, it was my control center checking up to see if I'm okay. And they say, control to 1712, is everything 10-4? And it was loud because I had neglected to turn my radio down. And I thought, oh dear. And I was right, because Jimmy, who was standing there yelling at the moon, turned around and suddenly looked at me, and he did one of these, a Hulk thing, like, I'm going to crush you. And his eyes just started peering into my own. And I thought, I am 20 feet from my car. If I run now, I'll never get there, because my training has told me he's going to pounce on me. And so I thought, what do I do now? And he's just huffing and puffing. And the first thing that came to mind is I put up my two hands like this. I said, I'm here to help. I mean you no harm. I'm here to help you. Are you okay? These words just came to me. I hadn't been trained on that, but just a showing of the hands, non-threatening, and just telling him that I was there to help. And the next thing that came out of my mouth was, you look cold. You're not wearing anything. There's a blanket in my trunk. How about if I get the blanket and put it on you, and I can take you to the hospital? It looks like you're in pain. He never said a word. He was still huffing and puffing, but he followed me. I got to the trunk. I opened the trunk and I put the blanket across his shoulders, and he's still looking at me. Now this man, 6'2", built like Thor, like big muscles, wearing his underwear, but now a blanket. He had scars on his face, and he had teeth missing. His hair was long, blonde, stringy hair. I think at one time he was a very handsome man, but life and beatings and just the fights that he got into, I think got the better of him. And I know that he was a hardened criminal. I didn't know that at the time. So I'm opening the side door, the front side door for him in the cruiser. And my briefcase was sitting there, but I put it in the back seat where criminals usually go, right? In the back seat. But I'm putting my briefcase there and having Jimmy sit in the front seat with me. I'm 2 years on. What am I thinking, right? People are probably thinking, you're crazy. Yeah. I think maybe I was. And I got into the driver's side. And as I said, the heat was there, and got in. And I remember picking up my radio and saying, 1712 to control. I have Jimmy Donovan on board, and I'm taking him to the Oshawa General Hospital. And no sooner did I say that about 15 cops who should have been with me, backing me up, who had not made it to the scene yet, are all jumping on the radio saying, he's crazy, you're going to die. Wait a minute, wait for us. And they're jumping on each other. And all I'm hearing is these broken sentences that I'm going to die. And I thought, okay, time to turn down the radio and it's time to just start driving. In the car with Jimmy, who had just come out of the cold with a blanket on him and the heat hitting him, you know what he did? He put his head down and he started to cry. He started to cry. And I drove him to the hospital. When we got to the hospital, the hospital had been alerted. So we were directed directly into an examination room because they didn't want Jimmy. They knew Jimmy. They knew he could be violent even in the hospital. So we got a room to the side to wait for the doctor. And the door was closed. And now it's just Jimmy and I in these closed quarters. And I had instructed my dispatch that I had arrived at the hospital, and guys were saying, we're on our way, we're on our way, we're on our way. So I'm sitting in this examination room, and Jimmy's sitting on the examination table. And I'm sitting on a chair with my back to the door. And I'm about 10 feet away from Jimmy, and about another 10 feet is where the examination door is. And Jimmy and I are having a pleasant conversation. We're just talking about nothing. We were just having a conversation. And he was relaxed, and he was actually smiling. And a few moments later, the door to the examination room bursts open. And I'm not kidding. 4 cops tried to get in through the door at the same time. One of them even had his gun out. The other one had his billy club out, and the other 2 are just trying to squeeze in. I know that these cops wanted a piece of Jimmy because Jimmy used to love to beat on cops. He used to do that as pastime. And these cops had probably been in a fight with Jimmy or been beaten by Jimmy, and they just wanted a piece of him. Now, when Jimmy sees this happening, I jump out of my chair, and Jimmy jumps off the examination table. He throws off his blanket, and he gets into his Hulk stance again, and I'm in the middle of this. 4 cops and Jimmy, they're about to have a battle, and I'm in the middle of it. What do you do now, Nadeau? What do you do? So I just put my hands out again, and I pointed at Jimmy, and I pointed at the cops. I said, you guys, get the hell out of here. If I need you, I'll call you, or you'll hear me screaming for my life, so get out of here. And I pointed at Jimmy, and I said, Jimmy, sit down. The cops leave, and Jimmy sits down. Doctor comes in about 20 minutes later, gives Jimmy a shot, and now the cops have left, and it's time to take Jimmy home, and he and I are still getting along. We're talking. I was going to church at the time, and I was a big churchgoer, and I had these religious tracts on me. And I remember telling Jimmy, hey, I'll drive you home. And I'm driving Jimmy home, and I don't know what possessed me. I turned to Jimmy and I said, hey, Jimmy, if ever you want to go to church, I'm going to write my number on this religious tract and give me a call. I'd be happy to pick you up and take you to church.
Oh.
He accepted it. And he said, thank you, Paul. And he says, Paul, you are one of the nicest policemen I've ever met. And I said, well, thank you, Jimmy. We're talking Paul and Jimmy, first names. And I remember, just having this pleasant conversation. As we get to his building, it's 4 o'clock in the morning, about 4 o'clock in the morning now. And he looks at me and says, would you like to come upstairs and meet my fiance? Pardon? Yeah, well, you want to come up and meet my fiance? And I'm looking at my watch, and I got 2.5 more hours on my shift. And I'm thinking, what the heck? What could possibly go wrong, right? So I said, yes. And as we're walking towards the elevator and in the elevator, I'm thinking to myself, well, Jimmy's not the most handsomest man, and he's a violent criminal. I wonder what she's like. And I'm thinking in my mind that she must be fat, missing her teeth, and all this kind of, we have these imaginations, and sometimes they get the better of us. And I'm thinking that she's not a very pleasant person, or not very pleasant to look at. And we're in the hallway, and we're walking towards this place, and I'm thinking she's probably asleep anyways. And as he gets to the door, he starts to open it. She's at the door. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful woman, wearing a beautiful floral dress. And in the sweetest voice, she says, thank you, officer, for bringing my Jimmy home. Holy mackerel. Prejudgment, man. You don't prejudge people. And that was so sweet. And I said, you're very welcome. And Jimmy and I shook hands. And that was it. At least I thought that was it. So I go back to work, and 2 weeks pass by. And I hadn't given Jimmy any more thought. I was just doing my job. Jimmy was Jimmy. And a lot of guys were a little bit upset, that they didn't get to hit Jimmy that night. And I get my sergeant saying, "Hey, a woman called for you and she wants you to give her a call back." And I said, "Okay." And that's not uncommon. You get a phone number and you follow up on it. And I give this woman a call. And she says, "Hi, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm Jimmy's fiance." I said, "Jimmy Donovan?" She says, "Yes, we met a couple of weeks back." And I said, "Yes, I remember you." She says, "Jimmy and I would like to go to church." What? I said, I said, "Okay." I said, "I tell you what, I'll pick you guys up on Sunday morning." And we made arrangements, and I did. So I'm wearing my 3-piece suit, and I get to their place, and she comes out, another beautiful dress, looking like a 10, just absolutely stunning, beautiful woman. Jimmy comes out, his hair's washed. He's wearing a 3-piece suit. It was tattered, but he looked like he could be on the cover of GQ. Like, I mean, even with his missing teeth, but he had a smile on his face, and it was just beautiful. And he was happy. I don't know what just happened there, but he was happy that that we were going to church. So we get to church, and the pastor was a beautiful man, and he welcomed us. "Hey, welcome!" And he got Jimmy's name and his fiance's name, and he made them feel very good. And I was a regular churchgoer, and I see a lot of my friends and people who would come up to me and talk to me, and "Hello, good morning, hello." So we sat through the service, and after church, I wanted to stand there with Jimmy and his fiance and greet a couple of people and introduce them to the congregation. Nobody came up to me. They avoided me because they knew who Jimmy was, or they had heard. Somebody had spread the word that we had a criminal amongst us, and nobody came. We stayed there for about 10, 15 minutes. Nobody came. The people are leaving, and I took Jimmy back home, and his fiance, of course. And the next Sunday I pick him up. Same thing. We drive up to the hospital. The pastor is so beautiful. He welcomes them. So nice to see you. He remembered their names. He calls them by name. "Thank you for coming." And we sat through the sermon. And at the end, we stood out there waiting for somebody to come up, and nobody came up. Another 15, 20 minutes. Nobody comes up. Third week, same thing. Nobody came to see us. No, these are my friends, people who would surround me and say, "Hey, Paul," and we would talk about our week and stuff like that. These were my friends from the congregation, and not one of them came up to say hello to this man and his fiance, because they had already judged him. The fourth week, Jimmy didn't have a smile much. He came, but I could see that he wasn't having a good time. I truly believe that Jimmy was looking for a new home, for a new life. And not one churchgoer gave him an opportunity for him to introduce himself and to show his true colors, or to show the colors that were beyond that angry, I guess, armor that he had developed over the years, because I don't know what his story was. And I can only imagine that he must have been treated very much the way that I was treated, but he didn't have the I guess, the opportunities, or he didn't have the know-how to get out of that. And after the fourth week, Jimmy said, "I won't be coming back, Paul." And I said, "Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, Jimmy, it didn't turn out that way." And we still remained in touch. I would drop over for coffee once in a while, but after about a year and a half, Jimmy had decided to leave our city, and he moved to Vancouver, and that was all I had to do with him until about 2 years later. It was about 2 years later. I'm still in uniform, and it was parade. The parade is where we're about ready to go out on the street, and the sergeant is telling us what our assignments are, and he's giving us the latest updates, or the bolos, be on the lookout for. And he says, yeah. He says, "You guys remember Jimmy Donovan?" And of course, everybody's got their hand raised. They remember, and a couple of them look over at me and they give me a smirk, because they knew that Jimmy and I had become friends. And the sergeant looks up and he says, "Well, you don't have to worry about Jimmy anymore. He died last night in a police shootout. We won't have to deal with him anymore." There was an applause from some of the officers out there, and smiles. And to me, it hit me like a ton of bricks. That was my friend who died in a police gun battle. when just 2 years earlier, he could have had a different life had it only been for just a few people saying, welcome. And that never happened. And I tell this story for a couple of reasons, is that we tend to judge without really knowing the circumstances or even taking an opportunity to find out if there is a chance. I've dealt with terrorists. I've dealt with murderers. I've dealt with all kinds of people who turned their lives around or who welcomed me or even protected me. And that's because of the way that I had treated them. And I truly believe that if the good churchgoers who were trying to protect themselves from an outsider, if they would have opened their arms and listened to the sermons that the pastor was telling every Sunday, treat your fellow man the way that you want to be treated, if they had just done that, Cynthia, and to all of you out there, I think Jimmy would be here or in this area with his wife and his children living a totally different life. And instead, he's 6 feet under. Wow. Tell me how that doesn't break your heart.
No words.
Yeah. Yeah. But those are just a couple of my accounts.
Ooh. 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 Patricia says angels guarding you.
You know, I do believe that. I do believe that there has been guidance, and I do believe that I'm here because there was a greater purpose for me being here. And I think that that's true of each and every one of us if we just look deep down inside and ask for help. I mean, it's not an easy thing to go through this thing called life unless we build within ourselves these mechanisms for dealing with past traumas or for experiencing the present as opposed to living in the past. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But I do believe that we are really in charge of our destinies, and that we may have these spirits and these guides around us, and that all we have to do is ask for their help or for the help of others, and we can make it through. I'm reminded of the story of Jesus Christ in the Bible, who had he had been arrested and he was about to be crucified, and he was carrying his heavy cross on his own to his own death. And how difficult and how heavy that cross was, to the point where even Jesus stumbled and fell to his knees because that cross was too hard for him to carry, until somebody else came out and helped carry that cross for him and with him. And isn't that true of life when we're going through our struggles? Our crosses are so hard to carry. Why can't we ask each other for help during those times? Because somebody will be glad to help you with your own crosses. We can all do that for each other.
Yes.
I'm getting all teary-eyed here.
I'm sure there isn't an audience member who heard that story here, or one that's watching on the replay. Please share it out, because, yeah, there it is.
I love to teach, and I love to share my experiences, because I don't have all the answers, but I have a lot of them for myself. They may not apply to everyone who's listening, and to each and every one of you who are here. Thank you. I'm just looking at the list. We have Christopher Mann, my friend. Christopher's here. We have Patricia. We have Darlene. And thank you guys for being here.
And Patricia has some other questions too.
Sure. Yeah, I just want to share this one thing.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I believe that there's a past, present, and future, just like everybody else does. And I was on Clubhouse, this wonderful application where I met Christopher and a number of other wonderful people. And we used to greet. You were on it?
Some of them.
Okay. And we used to greet each other, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because we didn't know where everybody was coming from. But, there's a past, present, and future for each of us. And what I feel is the downfall for many people is that people are living in two places they ought to not be living. They're either living in the past or living in the future. They are not spending enough time on the very moment. This moment here is the most important moment of my life. You know why, Cynthia? I get to share it with you and with your audience. This is the most important moment of my life. At this moment, it is this right here. To be able to share my experiences and to be able to see each and every one of you, your comments, and just being in the moment is what I can control. I can control how I respond to life. I can smile. I can tell a joke. I can tell a sad story. I get to control this. And it's what's the most important thing. So those who are living in the past, who are living with, well, I was abused as a kid, or I never got the breaks as a kid. And they go and they visit these places that torture them and that keep them shackled to past experiences. And there's far too much of that going on. And then we have other people who are just living in the future. One day I will be rich. One day I will find the love of my life. One day I will. This is the day.
Yes.
This moment is the moment. This is the day.
Yes.
Our present moment, this moment is what you get to control. Don't focus on the things that you cannot control. You don't focus on the past. Don't focus on the future. You can plan for the future, sure, but don't make it your life. Make this moment your life. Tell someone you love them. Hug somebody even more tonight, when you have that moment. Make that moment last. Squeeze it out, because we just don't know how long each of us are going to be here. We talk as though we have all the time in the world, and yet 150,000 people died across, this great country in the last 24 hours, I'm sure. And there are people dying as I'm speaking right now, and they thought that they were going to live until they were 95 and they're 20. And I know, because I used to have to drive to homes to tell parents that their children had been killed in an accident or had drowned. So I know how fleeting life can be. So if you're not living in this moment and just appreciating and being grateful for what you have, then you're focusing on the wrong things. Anyways, when I get spinning off this way, Cynthia, just pull me in and say, hey, that's enough, Paul.
Nope. Just too good.
What are some of the questions?
Patricia said to ask about finding humanity in terrorism and the Air France negotiation.
Oh, yes. Finding humanity in terrorism is really, it comes back to the story I just told you about the terrorist who saved my life.
Yes.
We all judge, we label people. Hey, criminal, stripper, hooker, terrorist, doctor, lawyer. We label people. And it's like when you're walking down the hallway. I don't know if any one of you have experienced this, but when I was being bullied, those little Post-it notes, somebody would write, stupid or idiot or whatever, and they'd slap you in the back. Hey, how you doing? And they would label you as this person. Or people would start talking behind your back and saying, well, he's a real loser, or she's a real loser, or she's really loose, or he's, a real player. And they label us. And finding humanity in terrorism is an example where a terrorist saved my life. And if I had labeled him terrorist and kept that label on him, do you think I'd be here talking to you today? No,
sir.
Not every terrorist is bad. Not every terrorist wants to be a terrorist. I found out that from being in the midst of this and listening to the stories of these young men who say, it's not easy. We have to save our families. We have to feed our families. The terrorists pay us money. The terrorists threaten to kill us. The terrorists will bomb our families or kill our families if we don't go along with them. And you're thinking, oh my God, this is a side that I've never seen before. You mean you had no choice? Hey, I had a choice. If I would have said no, they would have killed my family. And yes, I knew of 5 families who had been slaughtered by terrorists because the officers that were at my academy said no to them. And I got the phone call saying, you were checking up on Ahmad's family? Yeah, I was. Well, we went to his home. His baby, his children, and his wife were all slaughtered. It's because he didn't join them and he came to the police academy. And I had to deliver that news to the families of 5 that while I was there. And there were many more that we didn't know of. So that's what I mean about finding humanity in terrorism. Finding humanity in labels. Go beyond the label and take the time to find out who that person is. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got a story. Everybody's got something to say. Everybody's had an experience. We all laugh, love, and bleed in the same way. We're more similar than we are different, but we judge each other. We judge each other without taking the time to understand or to talk to one another or to agree that on some issues we're going to disagree. But it doesn't mean I have to kill you. It doesn't mean that I have to hate you. And we see what that's doing across our great globe. We have two fighting people, two groups of people fighting right now, the Palestinians and the Israelis, and everybody thinks they're right. And nobody wants to listen to the other side. And they're killing each other and they're slaughtering each other and they're fighting each other in the streets. Take a look. All you got to do is turn on the news. If you haven't seen the fights and the yelling and the screaming and the demonstrations, you're missing it. It's happening right now. It's because people are not taking the time to understand each other and to work together. That's number one. The other thing, the Paris, the Air France, that's kind of a funny story. And I was vacationing during my year of peacekeeping in the Middle East. I had come to Canada and spent a couple of weeks with my family, and I was on my way back to Jordan to finish my tour. And I was in Paris, France, on a 747, I think it was, and we're on the tarmac. It was a very, very hot day, and it took us about half an hour to get into the plane because of technical difficulties or aviation difficulties, and we finally got in. Now I'm waiting, and we're all waiting to take off, but the plane's not taking off. We're still on the tarmac. The plane is not taking off. We're waiting for some kind of announcement. No announcement. Half an hour goes by, nothing. Stewardesses aren't answering anything. I shouldn't say stewardesses, the air attendants weren't answering anything, and we didn't know. And 45 minutes goes by. The air conditioner wasn't working. We're all sweating. We're on this little bucket on the tarmac. And I happen to be sitting. I don't have the aisle seat, but there was nobody sitting beside me, and I could see the window outside, and I look outside and I see all these police vehicles coming towards our plane and these heavily armed officers getting out, this tactical unit. And I'm thinking, well, that's not good. They're just outside our plane. Something's going on. And sure enough, a couple of minutes later, the cabin in which I was sitting in, the curtain comes back and the pilot was there surrounded by armed police officers with their guns out. And the pilot is yelling at one male passenger and yelling something, "Get off my plane. You threatened to blow up my plane." And he's speaking this broken English. It's in Paris, and he's a French pilot. And the police officers have got their guns out and they're pointing and everybody's in shock. And some people are starting to cry. And I'm looking around and I'm thinking, oh my God, we are in the middle of a terrorist threat to blow up the plane. And the captain was trying to shout at this guy. And I'm looking around and I'm concerned because these officers, they could pull the trigger at any time. And usually a terrorist who's going to take over a plane waits until the plane is in the air, but this didn't happen. And I'm thinking there must be somebody working with him because they seldom work alone. So I'm looking around the cabin to see if anybody else is working with him. I couldn't see anybody who looked like they were kind of nodding him on and saying, let's get on with it. So I'm thinking, nah, he's alone. And the captain is still doing a very bad job. He's shouting. You don't get cooperation from someone if you're shouting at them, or you listen to me, you get off my plane. If it's a terrorist, he could blow up the plane at any time. What do you do, Nadeau? Okay, so I slowly raised my hand because I didn't want to, hey, here I am, and they would have shot me. So I'm slowly raising my hand, and I say, Capitaine, and I speak French. And I said, je suis un policier. Est-ce que je peux parler avec vous? And hey, I'm a police officer. Can I speak with you? And I showed him my hands, and he says, yeah, come here. So I walk up to the captain, and the police officers are looking me up and down, and I said, listen, I'm a hostage negotiator. Would you like me to take over for you? Would you like me to speak to the suspect? And the captain says, oh, oui, merci, merci. Yes, thank you, thank you. And he is just so happy, and the police officers seem to be happy too. So I walk up to this male who had made the threat, and there was somebody sitting beside him who was crying and white knuckling it. And I said, do you mind if I take your chair? And of course, she didn't mind at all. She got up and she took off. And I sat beside this guy and I just started talking to him. And fortunately, he spoke English. And it took me about 45 minutes to talk this guy off. And To this day, I don't believe he was a terrorist. I don't believe there was a bomb on that plane. I just think that he was frustrated, just like the rest of us. And he shot off his mouth saying, I should blow up this plane. Somebody heard it and thought it was a threat. And that's how I talked this guy off. And I don't know if he was a terrorist or not, but it was a happy ending, and it's a story to tell. It's kind of one of those, hey, I just happened to be on a plane one day and talked this guy off. Yeah. Well, you would never believe what happened to me.
On vacation, right? Weren't you on vacation there?
Yeah. Just coming back home. You know, I was on my way to Jordan, and we finally got there. And after hours of waiting, because I think we even had to change planes, but the captain invited me up to the cockpit to sit with him. And I didn't get to see anything because it was nighttime by then. But it would have been nice if it was daytime and I could have seen the clouds, but no, it was just one of those experiences. So those are my stories.
There was one more question on Patricia's little list there.
And what was it?
Where did you live? In Squatchicon?
In where?
Skinnappleton?
Skinnappleton. Oh! I didn't live in Saskatchewan. I live in Ontario. I've never lived in the West Coast, Saskatchewan. I live currently in Toronto, Canada, right by the CN Tower. Probably a 15-minute walk from the CN Tower, right downtown.
It's a good place to be. It's a good place to be.
It was. I've got to say that Toronto has really become a tent town, and there's a lot of homelessness, and we really haven't recovered from COVID, and it's probably time for me to put my walking shoes on and maybe go to Spain, Mexico, Vietnam, someplace, and just live on a beach somewhere and just kick back and say, all right, what do you got for me next, life? You know, one of those, right?
Well, Patricia Gage actually has orphanage in Cambodia. You might want to check that out. We'll hook you to that. It's pretty cool. Good. But meanwhile, Eric, could you please put up Paul's books so you can see he's got 4 books out, and he has an amazing podcast. Look at that. Take Control of Your Life, Mastering the Hostage Within, Damn It, Just Ask, which he's in rewrites for, so it's even going to be better, and The Badass Guide to Conflict, because we are badasses. And your podcast is amazing. I watched, I think I told you, 19 and a half.
Wow.
And I thoroughly enjoy them. So ladies and gentlemen, if you're not doing anything and you want to get inspired every day, sign on to It's Inspired. Is that the name of it? I'm trying to find it.
Inspire Us.
Inspire Us. Just go to his website. It's so easy. It's his name. And sign in on that. Follow him. Get the books. Listen to the books. Read the books. And he is available for public speaking and coaching, and I think actually anything that you might need help with that we did not mention in that little list, because obviously he can talk to people, communicate with people, cares about people. And wouldn't you like to have him on your team? I know I'm lucky to have him on mine.
Thank you, Cynthia. And I got to say to everyone out there, thank you very much for joining and for participating in this and for asking your questions and just listening in. And Cynthia's right. I do care about people, and I think that we all do in our own special ways. But I want to encourage you. I want to just leave you with a couple of thoughts. Our destiny is in nobody else's hands but our own. Our happiness is in nobody else's hands but our own. People don't bring us happiness. They don't give us happiness in a box and say, here, I've got a box of happiness for you. No, we get to choose that ourselves. We get to choose that from inside of ourselves. A birthday cake doesn't bring us happiness. Our choice to be happy does. It's not the birthday cake. It doesn't make you happy. It's the fact that you are surrounded by people that you love and you decide to be happy. That's what gives you happiness. We can't find happiness in another person. Oh, if I meet this person, I'll just be happy. No, that comes from inside of you. And it really is your job to keep yourself in line and to find your own happiness and your own adventures, or whatever it is. It's nobody else's. I'm going to leave you. I don't know how much time we have. I don't even know what time. Oh, wait a minute.
We're so over. It doesn't matter. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah.
We're too good. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm pinching myself. Let's go. It's amazing.
I'm so sorry.
Amazing.
I get carried away, but I want to leave you with this. I heard something very interesting. It was Tom Hanks was it was a video that I saw on one of the social medias. I think it was on TikTok, and he was sitting at a table with A-list actors, a bunch of A-list actors, and he says, have you ever heard the old saying that this too shall pass? And he says, have you had a really hard time and you're going through a hard time right now? Well, this too shall pass. You ever had an audition that didn't work out and you were really disappointed? Well, this too shall pass. And he goes on and he continues saying that. And then he turns it around. He says, you ever had a really great moment or been in a great moment and thought this is going to last forever? Well, this too shall pass. And it's true. He was making the point that in our times of difficulty and trouble, we can look at our circumstances and remind ourselves, this too shall pass. And that gives us strength. But why not do it when you are experiencing something beautiful, like when you are holding your grandchild, or when you are with your daughters or your husband or your wife, or you're embracing with your loved one, your significant other. When you're kissing, think in the back of your mind, this too shall pass, and kiss a little bit longer, hug a little bit tighter, take an extra picture, because we will never stand in the same river twice. These moments, good and bad, will pass. So if they're bad, let's encourage ourselves that this too shall pass. But if they're good, let's remind ourselves that this too shall pass, and let's make the best and squeeze the most out of that moment, because it really is this moment that matters. And those are my words, and I apologize for going over, but I do speak a lot.
For savoring the moments and savoring the words. And Eric, will you put on Cassie's little song, and I will survive, because we are all surviving and we are all living our best life right now, because we had this amazing time with Paul. And I want to thank each and every one of you. Patricia is actually in she says, visit her studio in Hamilton and then go to Cambodia.
Gotcha.
She's an artist. I have actually one of her photographs in my room. She plays the drums. You're going to love her. Eric, we're going to have on the show. And Darlene, thank you for joining us. And Grace, thank you for joining us. And I think I missed a few people. But here we go. Listen to this. There is the Inspire Us. And this is Paul's daughter, Casey Nadeau. And this is her singing her rendition of I Will Survive. It's in episode 108 of his Inspire Us, if you want to hear her again. Oh, wait, 110. 110.
Yeah, it's Cassie Nadeau, and she's on YouTube. Oh, can't hear it.
And if you can't hear it, you'll just have to go to episode 110 or listen to her on YouTube. It's Cassie. Same last name, Nadeau. Love you all. If you stay with me for the dark green room and we want to say goodnight, we love you. Thanks for staying on. Reach out. You've got more questions? Let's do it. Love you. Make smart choices. Tell someone you love them.